What's up everyone, Victoria Dorsano here, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about boundaries and what boundaries mean to me. This was kind of spurred on by a recent conversation I had with a friend, and I really wanted to dive into it because it is super important to have healthy boundaries to be a healthy human. So we're going to talk about that today, but before I dive in, if you could go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. So like I mentioned, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and we were just talking about what boundaries mean. And it came to my attention that we saw boundaries as two very different things. And I guess I take for granted that I see boundaries in a certain way and not everybody sees it that way, right? Like anything, we all have different perspectives of things. But I thought it was really interesting and I wanted to share a little bit about how I think about boundaries, and maybe that can be helpful to you. And then also how to set effective boundaries, because we're not really taught how to do that. And it is so important to being a healthy human to be able to set boundaries effectively with people, with yourself. You know, in a lot of ways, boundaries can be agreements with yourself too. So I want to get into that today, and let's go ahead and dive in. So in this conversation with a friend I was having, we were just talking about what each of our boundaries are, right? What that means for us. And the way I see boundaries is kind of like you have this outer circle, which are your limits, right? Your outer limits. Like if you respect me, like you're not going to call me this name, this bad name, right? And if you do that as like crossing over an outer limit, that's like an outer barrier, right? There's kind of that bigger, firmer boundary. And then I kind of see there being softer boundaries, like an inner line. And those I feel like are my preferences, my desires, my wants, my wishes, all of those things. So I call those kind of like softer boundaries, like that inner circle. And I still call them boundaries because it's important to me that people know that about myself, that they know what's important to me, what I care about, so that, you know, they're respecting that, and equally on their end. Like I want to know what their preferences, desires, and all of that are too. So not only are boundaries are these kind of harder outer lines, right? I think where a lot of people have a perception of what that is, right? That's kind of what most people think of boundaries as, is this kind of external, like keep out sign, where you're laying down a boundary and it's this like hard wall. There are those, but I also think of them as this like softer inner layer, like these preferences, desires, and wants and wishes. And it was just interesting because when I was having this conversation with a friend, their preconceived notion of boundaries was just that like outer wall. Like if you set a boundary with me, you're trying to keep me out. And for me, if I set boundaries with people or let people know where my boundaries are, both those outer ones and those inner ones, it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of like, hey, I want to be in relationship with you, and here's how it's going to be healthiest for us to do so. So I think that's really important to share because I didn't think about it that way. And it was interesting because when I was bringing up the word boundaries, it was like such a negative connotation to it. And I understand now. But I actually see it as something that's really good and healthy and productive. And I think if we're trying to, you know, become healthier, I know a lot of you guys watching this channel, you know, I'm a health coach, right? So I'm all about promoting healthy living, healthy lifestyle, but that also, you know, entails having healthy boundaries. So, you know, what does that look like for you? I can probably show up in the form of having healthy work-life boundaries, right? Being very transparent and clear with your boss or your team at work that, hey, after this time, this is personal time for me. This is when I transition into spending time with my family, my loved ones, my friends, and work stays out of there. You know, work stays in a different space. That's what a boundary can look like, right? A boundary can even look like if a friend is trying to kind of pull you into something and you don't want to necessarily be a part of that, or go out one night and you just really need to stay home and recharge your battery, setting a boundary saying like, hey, no, please stop trying. This is really important to me. I really need to stay home and respect what my body and my mind needs right now to recharge. So it can kind of be a variety of things, right? But in either case, it's voicing what's okay for you, what feels right for you, and what you prefer, what you desire. And boundaries are really just a way, the way I see them, for other people to really truly know you and really truly see you. And it's an avenue for people to really love you, right? If we're being seen, if we're being heard, and if we're being respected in that way, we're also allowing ourselves to be the opportunity to be loved by others and appreciated by others. And I think that's so important, because if we don't voice those things, if we don't lay those boundaries out with work, with friendships, even with ourselves, and having those agreements with ourselves, then nobody really knows us. Like, we don't really know us if we're constantly defaulting on our own boundaries too. Nobody really knows truly who we are if we're not voicing those out loud. And I think that's so important, because to feel seen and heard by other people, and then again, taking it a step further to allow yourself to feel loved by other people in your community. And when I say loved, I don't mean like romantic love. I mean like loved, appreciated, understood, like in any kind of friendship. It's really powerful. I think it's the basis of what we as humans really truly desire, is to feel loved and accepted. But we can't feel loved and accepted if we're not communicating what's okay and what's not okay with us, what we prefer and what we don't prefer. If somebody pushes a boundary with me and starts to kind of push me to do something that I don't want to do, I'm going to grow resentment, and I'm going to feel like they don't respect me. So it's my responsibility to set that boundary with them and have that discussion, right? So all of that is a huge part of being a healthy person, being a healthy human. And I know I talk a lot about nutrition and fitness and, even knee recovery stuff, since that's been part of my journey on this channel, but I would be amiss to discount how important this piece of it is, probably just as, if not more important than the other components, because feeling emotionally and mentally healthy is so key, because it's the lens in which we're perceiving and living through, right? And that's so important. So what does it look like to set boundaries, to set healthy boundaries with people that you care about and want to continue having a relationship with, right? What does that look like? And these can be, again, with coworkers, with friends, with family, with yourself. Maybe not with yourself, because this is going to be more of like an outward expression kind of conversation, which sure, we have conversations with ourselves all the time, but not quite like this. So this is more so like with other people outside of yourself. But there's a really great acronym called DEARMIN, the DEARMIN acronym. I've missaid that like a billion times. Acronym. But first it starts with describing the situation, right? Describing the situation at hand. And a common one I hear a lot as a health coach is people coming to me and saying like, hey, I'm hanging out with my friends and, they are really bringing up a lot of stuff about body image and diet talk. And, some of the people I work with have had past history with body dysmorphia and things, and have gone through therapy and different things like that. So it can be a sensitive issue for them, right? So they'll come to me and say, hey, I've been experiencing this. I've been going out to eat with my friends, and they are constantly talking about their bodies, and they are constantly talking about, how they shouldn't eat this, shouldn't eat that. And it makes me really uncomfortable, and it kind of triggers me into thinking all these kind of dysmorphic thoughts about myself and my body, right? So that's like a situation I'll use, because that's something that commonly comes up when I'm talking to people and they're working on healthy eating, and maybe have had a past with some body dysmorphia and things of that sort. But the biggest thing I say is like, describe the situation with that friend or group of friends in particular, and be like, let's say, hey, Samantha, I'll just kind of act it out, right? Just so you guys can see what it sounds like. So I'm describing the situation like, hey, Sam, when we had lunch the other day and you were, talking about, how you feel like you shouldn't be eating this and shouldn't be eating that. And then like kind of looking at my plate and starting to pick that apart and starting to talk about your body in a bad way. It was just really starting to bring me back to when I was, experiencing a lot of body dysmorphia and eating stuff in my past. And it just really kind of made me feel uncomfortable. And that's where we go into the E part, which is express, right? So it really just made me feel kind of uncomfortable. And it started to trigger some of these like negative thoughts for me that weren't really helpful to my healing journey. And that's just how I was feeling, right? So that's the D, the E. Then we're gonna go into A. So the A stands for assert, meaning assert what you would like to happen in the situation. So I'm going to continue forward with this example with this hypothetical friend of mine, Sam, and I'll say like, and Sam, I would really like for us to, maybe not have that kind of conversation at the table when we're eating. And if you could limit some of the diet talk, that would really help me in my journey as I'm continuing to have, and develop a healthy relationship with food in my body, right? So in that situation, I am asserting what I would like to happen. And in this particular example, it's, saying, hey, if we could just minimize that talk, that would be so beneficial for me, right? I'm saying what's important to me, what's important and crucial for me to really heal and grow and continue to develop a healthy relationship with food, right? So even in that assert portion, I already started to move into the R portion of the Dearman acronym, which is to reinforce why it's important to you, which I did when I was saying, this is really important for me, for my healing journey, for how I'm dealing with and relating to food right now, right? So I'm reinforcing why this is important. You can even add in like, Sam, and this would really just help me appreciate you as a friend a lot more if we can have this mutual understanding, to have this respect between the two of us, right? So because ultimately at the end of the day, you are setting a boundary with somebody because you still want to be in a relationship with them. You still want to, in most cases, unless you're setting like a really hard boundary, like do not contact me, that's different. We're talking about these boundaries where you are kind of having this talk back and forth and saying, hey, this is what's important to me. Can we honor this? Because I love you as a friend, or I respect you as a coworker, or whatever the conversation might be, right? Then we're moving on to the M portion of Dearman, and that is to just make sure you're maintaining focus on the main part of this conversation, which is you setting this boundary, right? It may very well be that, depending on the person, they might try to take over the conversation and control it. It's really important that you try to bring that back in and be like, hey, I know this is important to you too, but this is a conversation I really need to have, and make sure that we have clarity and can tie this conversation up first before we dive into that stuff. Is that okay, right? So you can kind of gently redirect the conversation back into an area that is still establishing your point. And then we're moving into the A part of Dearman, which is to appear confident and to, I think not necessarily like egotistical, like I'm so important and I need these boundaries to be respected. No, right? It's about, hey, I'm confident that this is right for me, that this boundary is important for me. And if you love me and respect me and still want to be in a healthy friendship or healthy working relationship or whatever it might be with the person you're talking to, it would really mean a lot for me if we could make this happen. So you're appearing confident in what the boundary is and how you're presenting it and trying to be clear with that. And then the N portion is negotiate, right? When we move to the last part of that acronym. And negotiating, not necessarily like falling back completely on your boundary. It doesn't mean to lay flat if the other person's like, absolutely not, I won't do that. It's more so saying, opening up and saying like, hey, is that okay with you? Does that sound like a fair proposition to you? And being open to hearing their thoughts around it. And then you can make a decision from there. If that's a relationship you want to continue, if you want to continue investing in it or not. But those are kind of the steps to really setting good boundaries in a way that's relationship building, that's self-confidence building, that really helps you be seen and known and heard. And like I said, all those things are really important to feel loved in a relationship, to feel understood. And when we feel loved and understood, it's a healthy thing for us. It's a healthy thing for our mind, for our emotions, for our bodies. So this is why this is all ties into being a healthy human. And again, we're not taught how to do this, right? There's so many times where, in order to learn how to set a boundary, we have to have a boundary violated sometimes. And we've all had that happen through the process of growing up because we don't quite know ourselves all the time, right? I'm still learning parts of myself, but until I'm aware enough to be like, ooh, whatever that person did to me or said to me was not okay. And that really made me feel a certain way that felt like I was disrespected or misunderstood or whatever it might be. Then you can go ahead and learn from that and be like, maybe there needs to be a boundary here. Or if you're constantly just exhausted because you're doing everything for everybody else but yourself, there probably needs to be some boundaries set up there, right? Some parameters to take care of yourself and kind of negotiate that with other people in your life. So I just wanted to put that out there. This is something that I talk a lot about with my clients, and I thought it was just, again, a really interesting conversation that kind of was spurred on by this conversation I was having with a friend of mine. And I'm so glad I had it because, again, I take for granted that I see boundaries a certain way and other people see it as, you know, something that can be put up to maintain cold distance or block somebody out. And for me, it's all about feeling loved and heard and understood. And that's a beautiful thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and found this useful. If you have any more questions about boundaries or different situations that you need help with kind of curating a boundary around, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. And until then, if you can go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, I super appreciate it. So you can keep getting awesome content like this onto your YouTube feed. All right, guys, have an awesome day and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.